I think that's a deep human longing to feel that I can be seen and I can be acknowledged and I can have a place. It's like, God, am I to compare my creative endeavors with like the best of the best of the best? And then we're like, oh my God, no, I'm not. So then we swallow our children, right? We swallow our creative source, and that makes us sick, actually.
We're really getting into how it is that when we're in relationship with imagination, with a mythic lens, we don't automatically pathologize. It's like when we're in contact with our own myth, or mythic imagination, it's like the resources are endless. Welcome, everyone. This is my first interview for this podcast, and I feel really chuffed because it's with one of my best mates, Chris Skidmore. I'm going to tell you about him in just a sec. But in this chat, what we're talking about is resensitizing the body and our intuition so that we can trust our appetite and our desire and also feel satiated by it, for that to, if we get what we want, that what we get actually lands someplace in the body and we feel the satisfaction of it. Because I feel like all of these things have been hijacked. They've been hijacked. And it's overexposure. It's the water that we're swimming in, which is massively polluted by strategic marketing. And I think that, well, I feel that it needs recalibration. And so with Chris, what we're talking about is how do we look at this from a mythic lens? Because Chris is steeped in astrology. He has an understanding of the human condition as a psychotherapist through his work as a psychotherapist. And he also has an incredibly rich knowledge of myth. We want to step out of, the pathological lens, the like, what's wrong with me, and into reacquainting ourselves with ourself via our imagination. And we're going to be sharing this around the Leo new moon. So we're talking about Leo, our sun, our creative expression and creative confidence, and also like what connects us into our magnetism, what makes us magnetic. So why would we turn to myth? What does this ancient way have to offer us? That's what we're going to get into. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you, Viv. Such an honor and a pleasure and a joy to be here. And thank you for inviting me on as your first guest. I feel very honored. And I just want to say a little sort of invocation or a prayer for your podcast that it goes into the world and it reaches people, touches people, and brings people back to that sense of joy. As you represent to me as a dear friend. Joy, expression, searching, seeking, finding, in fact, ways back to the soul, to the spirit, to the animating principles. And so then, my prayer for the podcast is that it does reach people, that it touches people, that it has its own purpose, that you can sort of midwife into the world and it can sort of take you on a journey as much as you take it on a journey. And I hope that all your listeners, are enriched by it, is my invocation and prayer for you.
Thank you. That is just so bloody lovely. I really, I really feel that talking about being sated, like I feel that in my face and I feel that in my body and in my heart. And I just really appreciate those words. So I feel like it's going to take me on a journey and I hope that everyone wants to come on the journey with me. And if life so far has anything is anything to go by, it's going to be one hell of a ride and one hell of a wiggly, non-direct journey. That's just how I roll. By feel, it always has been. And
Mm.
the thing that has really brought me back to life, the thing that I find that I've reconnected to, especially because we've been on each other for 20 plus years.
Mm.
It started with interpretive dance, and now here we are. Now here we
interpreting
are.
dancing in a
Yeah,
different way. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And now here we are, and we're really getting into the territory of the imagination with myth and how it is that when we're in relationship with imagination, with a mythic lens, we don't automatically pathologize. And I'm just
Mm.
really curious to hear from you, like, what is it about myth and this kind of ancient way of knowing that helps us in what we're talking about, which is recalibrating appetite and desire and satiety, coming into connection to intuition without being like, what is wrong with me? Why do I keep doing this? Like, what is it about myth that helps us with that?
Yeah, I guess we probably have to start with the acknowledgement that myth was, I don't know, maybe is diminished as a form, as a sort of way of understanding the world. As we can see by our language, that we have like the myth of something essentially says that it's false. So we've equated in the collective an idea that myth and falsehood go together, like that's just a myth. And I think that means in the sort of collective, it means that it's not factual and not truthful. And I guess that's the sticky territory of myth, in that it is, it's, I've heard it said that it's a lie that reveals the truth. That's really difficult for the modern mind that is so hell bent on the scientific and hell bent on like, let's just get to the bottom of things. What's true and not true? Just tell me. Don't mess around with all that stuff, like just tell me. Um, but myth gives us lies that reveal the truth. And I think the way that myth does that, and fairy tales that we'll get into today as well, which is sort of like fairy tales is like a condensed myth in a way. Like we take myth is difficult to get to, it's always fragmented. Um, I mean, I guess that might be a good start actually to define it as best that we can, to sort of like wriggle, as you say, wriggle around in the definition of something as broad as myth. Um, I would say that myth is something that comes out of a collective dreaming process, um, that it's told and retold by people around campfires, and everybody has a turn at it. Everybody gets a go at it. You don't have to be the one who knows to have a go at it. You just start telling. And then what's going to come through is your subjective experience of it. And then somebody else might come through and bang, now they've got their subjective experience of it. And then if you run that for a few thousand years, or at least maybe a few generations, then what you'll get is the reforming of mythic material. So it's kind of always kind of stemming from a pre-written place, I believe. Like it sort of stems from a verbal, um, oratory, often to song place. You can get a sense of a rhythmicness to myth, like there's a rhythm in it and a rhyme in it. And it's a beat and it's a song. And it's something that intrinsically humans have always done and always will do and will never stop doing. Like there's that component of it. We'll never stop. Um, but when things get sort of written down, or when we get to know, oh, there's a power in this myth, there's a power in this thing called myth, then other frequencies come in and say, like, oh, that has power, so I'm going to use myth for this particular purpose. And it stops being mythic and starts to drift into what I would call propaganda.
Yeah. So the threads that I'm picking up from this is that it's iterative and
Mm,
adaptive, that it
mm,
has like a life force energy of its own, that it's constantly kind of regenerating in a way. And that
yeah.
as soon as someone wants to pin it down and almost like echo it rather than being part of the regeneration, then it becomes propaganda. Is that right? Do I understand that
Yeah, I
correct?
mean, I guess I should sort of ease off on the word propaganda here because we're all doing propaganda. But like, we're all kind of like, let me tell my version of this. Let me give my thing. We all have a sort of like an impetus and a drive to our telling of myth, and that's fine. That's kind of like good in its own way. But I think, as you say, like it's when we pin it down, and I think that's a good expression for it. the image that comes up as we're talking about this is the spider, and there's a really great story in myth of Arachne, which is where we get arachnophobia and the whole species of spider, a Greek word, um, who comes into a battle. It's a very famous myth. I'm sure many know about it. Comes into a battle against Athena, who's a weaver. And so they come into a battle of weaving tapestries. And Athena is weaving the tapestry of how great all the gods are. Look at this, and oh, by the way, this, and like as she's weaving a tapestry, she's telling a myth and a story. And Arachne begins to tell the story of like all the transgressions of the gods. She's like, and then Zeus raped that person, and Zeus raped that, and starts to expose. And this Zeus is Athena's like dearly loved father, right? And also the father of the gods. She's like, how dare you? So there's a sort of like an interesting, like this propaganda or that propaganda. I mean, they're both exaggerating, they're both overdoing it, right? But Arachne is starting to tell, like starting to reveal. And so then this battle happens and occurs between them. And Athena gets so furious about that she turns Arachne into a spider so that she can weave forever. And I thought of the spider when you said regenerative, because that's the web, right? That's the other thing about myth. It exists in an enormous web, and if you pull at one strand of it, other strands of it start to respond to your pulling. It's an infuriating thing to get into if you want things to be logical and ordered in a
Mm.
in a logical linear way. Because it's just when you get to the bottom of a myth and you're like, yes, I think I've got this one, you'll have a variation show up in your world and it'll completely turn it. And you're like, oh, but I thought it meant this and now it means this. So it completely throws you off.
So there's then something in this, you tell me if I'm on the right track, about the need for something to have a finite meaning that is also somehow linked to how we pathologize, as
Mm,
opposed to allowing things to be connected to everything as the web
yeah.
is, and
Mm,
to never getting to the bottom of it all.
yeah. And so what myth does and fairy tale does this so beautifully, like we'll see today, is that it gives you like, okay, here's the thing that I'm struggling with, but it puts it in a story where you can take multiple positions inside of that story. So then the fairy tale, um, whatever you get from the fairy tale is what you get from the fairy tale. That's actually, so even if you get really riled up by a fairy tale, the fairy tale remains open to a completely opposite interpretation or tangential interpretations and other ways of working with it. That's always going to be the case.
I think that's such a good point, and it's actually so interesting because I've heard a similar thing about tarot cards, like that the
Mm,
image is neutral, and then
yeah,
it's how we relate with the image itself that is offers what we have to work with in that moment. So the same may go for fairy tales, right? With that, or myth is
yeah,
right. And that's probably a good place just to kind of introduce the myth that we're planning to work with, or the fairy tale that we're planning to work with today. Do you want to talk a little bit
yeah.
about that?
Well, it's interesting because you're releasing this into the new moon, and I'm going to do the same. So I'm going to bring this to my listeners as well on the soul's terms. I'm going to bring it to my podcast as well, um, because it's not just a new moon; it's a solar eclipse. Um, and so I'm going to get into a little astrology here, in a way. Um, I'm going to keep it sort of simple, but as simple as I can in a sense. But that moment when there's a solar eclipse is when the moon essentially blocks, and from the perspective of the Earth, the moon gets in the way of the sun. And if you're in the totality of that, it can be quite striking as far as like the stars come out. I mean, it can become complete darkness in daylight. In a daylight moment, darkness enters. So it's kind of like it's a beautiful image, isn't it? Because it's like the night world consciousness enters into the day.
Mm.
And imagine this in the ancient world. because everything's so technological now. We've explained it all away. We anticipate it. We're ready for it, right? But in the ancient world, in the middle of the day, when it became nighttime and then became day again, you would definitely experience that as an omen from the gods. You would not think you would be in this participation mystique with this remarkable moment. Um, but what it is for us is that interaction between sun and moon, the solar and the lunar principles, sort of dancing with each other and occasionally getting in each other's way. Um, but it's that dance, and this particular solar eclipse um, heralds the beginning of the nodes of the moon being in the signs of Leo as the south node and Aquarius as the north node. So it begins an 18-month process essentially of an exploration of Leo and Aquarius, which to translate um, and put it in its simplest terms, although it won't, like myth, it won't remain in those simple terms, but just to put it there, it's the interaction between the individual and the collective. And it's the paradox of individuality and collectivism and the how they need each other, how they fight with each other, how they war with each other. Leo is ruled by the sun, and Aquarius traditionally was ruled by Saturn. So it also brings up a Sun Saturn um, sort of tension point, Sun being the interior authority and Saturn being the exterior authority, which brings us to the fairy tale, which is the story of the Frog King. Um, Probably the story dearest to my heart, the fairy tale that I love the most. And it's interesting because when I brought it up, and I think we've talked about it before, it's something that you also have a deep affinity with. Is that right?
Yeah, I was just saying to Chris before we jumped on the call that I remember having the Golden books. There were like a series of books, and I remember distinctly the image of the princess and her golden ball, like that story, the story of her adventure, misadventure with this ball, was one of two stories as a child that I really, really like viscerally remember that. So yeah, it's so cool to be working this story with you on this particular one.
Yeah, I know. And like you wanting to talk about that. Yeah, maybe you can say a bit more about like within this podcast, how because I really love where you're going with it, and I think we're going to be able to explore it within this fairy tale from such an interesting angle. Because it's one thing for me to say, here's what myth is for, and here's what myth is like, and here's what myth is and fairy tale is. But it's another thing to have the experience, right? Because in a sense, it's like by having the experience, your audience, you and me, can be taken um, on a journey of exploration, you know.
Mm.
But I want to maybe just pause and come back to like, tell me more about this like interior society, satiety,
Hmm.
um,
Yeah,
satiety
I
and
love that I've used
society,
that
maybe
word. Just, just,
the
just to really annoy. Like sometimes I interchange satiety and sated, and it's just like there's something really like it's one of those annoying words that we all struggle over.
Yeah, I
Um,
do. Yeah.
I suppose the reason the reason it feels important to weave myth into this felt sense of satiety or feeling satiated is that my own experience 5 years ago, of like really feeling that sense in my own body came about when I started to relate with my own kind of mythic imagination, my own creative expression. Like that's where I started to realize, wow, like this actually fills me up. This fills me up. This brings in like a contentedness. It also brings in like an aliveness into my body. Like I know when we chatted um, around the fifth house, I was talking about having like these creative practices that it kind of surprised me how much energy was physically generated from having the like smallest creative practice. So, coming into my own story, my own myth, and starting to understand like who I was, there was an image that came through for me a couple of weeks ago that was like, I was just chatting to a friend about body dreaming training, and the image came through that was like this cape that I had on, and it like went almost for infinity behind me, and everything that was in the cape was all that I have been up until this point, whether that's in this life or many lifetimes, or kind of like the timelessness, a cape of timelessness. And it really felt it connected me into my own imagination, like my dreams, the images that come in, like the impetus to create, the impetus to sing. And there was this process of needing to learn to bring that energy, the energy of that, actually through my body in order to like have this sense of creative, authentic creative expression of just from all that it is me, and that all of it is valuable, like the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? So
Mm.
this kind of connection into our own mythos, if that's the right word, is such a big
Mm.
part of also like the Leo, the self-expressed, the magnetism, like it's the, we talked about that, the kind of regenerative nature of myth. It's like when we're in contact with our own myth, or mythic imagination, it's like the resources are endless and it's
Mm.
always emerging behind and
Mm.
as a part of us. So it's like both so supporting and also so satisfying to bring it into then the world.
Mm.
Does that make sense, the way that I've described that?
Yeah, and what you're describing through the personal experience is also the archetypal journey between Leo and Aquarius. And this is one of my sort of deep, deep longings for astrology is to, and it's going to sound a bit silly to astrologers out there, but to sort of put aside the horoscope, to put aside the personal chart and sort of pick it up a little later once we've set the ground rules. Because actually, the journey between Leo and Aquarius, or Aquarius to Leo, that's because it's a two-way street going on there, is one of the six paradoxes, or one of the six tension points of oppositional energies. And so we can, because of our natal chart, we can think, oh, I don't have anything in Leo. I don't have anything in Aquarius. I don't have that. That's not my story. It's like, it's your story. It's everybody's story. And I think that that horoscope can actually sort of confuse us in some ways. And that's coming from an astrologer. I've been an astrologer for 20 years. I love it. I love working with my own chart, but it's a trickster technology and will also take me off course as much as it'll put me on course. So I think the starting point is just to say, like, this journey that V's describing from personal experience doesn't matter what her chart looks like. The felt experience is that something in the creative fire of Leo is trying to make its way into the world of Aquarius. And sometimes when we move into the world, we see like, oh yeah, come V, let's go. This is great. I love your work. And sometimes we see like, no, I don't like that. I don't want that. We don't want that. Take it back. And that's the other side. So Aquarius has the Saturnian and the Uranian behind it, but so it can invite and give you structure to it and give you a place to be in the world with it, the good Saturn, or it can block you and say, no, no. Saturn famously eats his children. So if we think about that in this context, mythically, and that's always the invitation, think mythically, think mythically, think mythically. So we're not going, oh, literally, he's literally eating his children. You know, he's mythically eating his children. So his creations are not seeing the light of day.
Mm.
His creative force is ingesting. It's coming into the body and it's being held into his ever bloating body. He takes in 5 deities into his body. So feel that. And then eventually, Metis and Zeus, sorry to bring in names like that, but it's just one of my habits. But they make a potion and he drinks the potion, starts to throw them back out. But then the thing is like throw up, spew them out. But then the thing is that then his creations come out fully formed. They're back out into the world. So there's something about that story of ingesting, taking it in, and then throwing it back out, right? And I guess we all pray that the light that we came in with, our God-given gifts, our God's given gifts, maybe, that they have a place in the world. I think that's a deep human longing
Mm.
to feel that I can be seen and I can be acknowledged and I can have a place. And so often I think in this world that we're inhabiting, it's like, God, am I to compare my creative endeavors with like the best of the best of the best, you know? So we come
Right.
out and go like, well, am I as good as painting, as whoever you want to name?
Picasso,
Yeah, exactly.
Frida Kahlo.
Yes, exactly. And then we're like, oh my God, no, I'm not. So then we swallow our children, right? We
Mm.
swallow
Oh gosh.
our creative source, and and that makes us sick, actually. It's not just a matter of like, oh, that's a shame, but it makes us sick as individuals and it makes the world sick because the world is also only experiencing like this sliver of the most creative genius that's out there and then missing everything else. Um, and so sometimes it's like I'm just going to bring my little bit of beauty out to my little world, and that's lots. That's a lot, in the way that behind you, Eve, for those watching on video, is this beautiful art. And that's just like, yes, you know, not to be hung in a gallery necessarily, but to be hung where you are in your studio, right? Like to be hung there,
Mm.
to be invited your children, your girls into also making art.
Mm.
How wonderful and how beautiful and how little do we encourage, or how little does this big world that we inhabit, this big sort of universe that we inhabit now, that feels so empty, it doesn't invite us. It does, there's not so many invitations.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes me think of it makes me think of a couple of things. Like one of them that, children are so inherently creative. If you just give them and leave things lying around, they'll draw on anything. And as soon as we start to add that pressure for it to be meaningful or have a purpose, it's like when that little fledgling creative kind of bird is just fluffing its wings, it just kind of gets broken. And
Mm,
so, what are the ways in which we can kind of reintroduce play, the creative
yeah.
play, into the everydayness of life in order that there's enough time given for things to kind of begin to flourish. Yeah, it's painful to hear, it's painful to think about that there's such a perspective. It also reminds me of a friend of mine that I interviewed for one of my summits last year. She was talking about growing up, I think, or visiting Africa. She's African, and she was saying in Africa, like anyone can play any instrument. You just like pick up the drum. I don't have to be a drummer to drum. I don't have to be
Mm,
a singer to sing. Like this over identification with being an artist or needing to be a singer or a drummer in order to just play and make music.
mm.
What that does to that light within, that kind of creative impulse within, how if we weren't so fixed on that identity, we might be more likely to kind of play in that space.
So I think that this is really So this is like we name the dilemma as best that we can, right? And then we take this dilemma, essentially the interior creative fire in the world outside and the tension between the sun and Saturn, um, the tension between these archetypal forces that we could say, oh, this is only in the modern world, but no, it's in the forever world, it's in the timeless world. This tension maybe showing up in a particular way in this world, but it's a forever tension as the wheel of the zodiac helps us to see in a different light, take it into the other world. But let's take this and let's take it into the story of the Frog King, because there's so much inside of this story that we can then experience of how the story may um, like turn us around and move us from place to place and help us see multiple different perspectives and then hopefully deliver us some medicine, which
Mm.
is what the stories ultimately always have inside of them. A little medicine is always just sitting in there. If we like a dream,
Mm.
the dream doesn't offer up its medicine. It invites us back to it, to spend time with it, to nurture it, to tend to it, and then the medicine can come forward. So I guess my wondering is like, can we take this dilemma into the fairy tale?
And I was going to add, as you're listening to Chris tell this fairy tale, just to notice what it is that catches your attention. And like, if you feel that somewhere in the body, or if another association comes in as you're listening to the story, because it's going to be so a unique experience for each person as you're listening. There's going to be some particular thing that catches your attention that doesn't catch someone else's. So just
Hmm.
an invitation to pay attention to what is evoked for you as you listen to the story.
Yeah, exactly right. And Viv and I, because we can't see you and hear you, we can't respond to what's going on for you. So then you can always pause and stop and draw or write or journal or do what you need to do or come back to it another time. Like, I guess that's the beauty of what we're doing here. You can pause, stop, come back, give it time. And I'll just say that this is from the Grimm Brothers collection, which makes it sound like the Grimm brothers were writers of stories, and they were not. They were collectors. Um, and they collected stories from the German countryside. And most of the people that came forth were women and often mothers and crone figures, because they're always the storytellers, and came forward with their stories. And the Grimm were scribes. They wrote them down and they collected them. Thank God that they did, because God, we have so much from that process that they went through. But in their collection, the number one story always was this story, always the number one. They made seven different editions. This was always the first. So the Grimms themselves thought, it seems, that this was an important one, that this was a front runner and a headline. Um, so let's sort
Wow.
of have that. We know it as the Frog King. Um, And right at this moment, I wish I'd gone and found the German version, because I have my German listeners that are often keen to hear me fumble around inside of the German language, which is a fun interaction that I have with my German listeners, but I didn't find it. I'm sorry. Um, so it begins, and the beginning of a fairy tale is always quite potent and packed. Fairy tales do a lot with a very few words. So let's begin with the youngest princess who is sitting at the edge of a dark forest playing with her golden ball. Youngest princess at the edge of a dark forest playing with a golden ball. And don't we all know a lot already? Don't we all just suddenly feel a lot? I mean, what do you feel, Viv, in that one line?
Just the anticipation, like I just see the darkness and the edge of the forest. And it's like so foreboding because I
Mm.
already see the light of the princess and I see the dark of the forest. And there's something about the two sitting next to each other that I'm like, oh boy. Like I'm already going, oh boy. because of the contrast.
Yeah,
As
the
opposed,
contrast.
yeah, the contrast is really sort of clear.
Yeah. And it's the edge as
Mm,
well. And like you say, the light of that ball, because it's golden, so you can get the sense that it is shining, it is glowing in a way, it is golden. And it contrasts spectacularly with what's just over the edge in the dark forest. And so we know that something's around, there's a force that's around that isn't in this princess's interest, that doesn't have the princess's interests at heart. We kind of know that already.
mm.
And she's playing. So she's tossing the ball up and catching it. That's the game. Just toss it up, catch it. This is one of the central games. Uh, you said, you give a baby goat, you give a child, and you just lay some things around and they'll start playing, right? So if they pick up a ball, this is what they'll likely do with it.
And I feel as you say that there's like both a naivety and there's also an awareness that she's playing on the edge of the forest. Like those
Hmm.
both those things are present at this beginning point of the story.
Yeah. If there's an awareness inside of her, do you think? Or there's awareness for us?
I think there is an awareness inside of her as well.
Hmm.
I think just because I think kids are so intuitive that
Hmm.
she's got an awareness that she's on the edge. She's on the
She's
edge
got an
there and
awareness
she's
that she's on.
playing there
It's
and she's
beautifully
playing
said.
there and she's
Yes.
playing there.
She may even have a desire at this point. There may be something about the edge that, for all of us, for all of our little princess inside, or prince, or whoever that one is, this is where that one wants to be playing.
Mm.
Not in the middle of the courtyard, not inside of the walls, not even just outside of the walls, but beyond the walls and beyond the palace and out here, but not in the forest. And that's a really interesting distinction for
Mm.
this princess. She's not in the dark forest. She's just on the edge. She's got a certain curiosity,
Yeah.
which brings up a lot. I mean, that's the thing about fairy tales. To me, it just brings up a lot of acknowledgement of that place, acknowledgement of where it is, acknowledgement of the golden ball. She's playing around with innocence, you know, and just so close to something that feels a bit foreboding. But also, the dark forest isn't just foreboding. It's like there's something beautiful in there. There's something magical in there as well, something forgotten, something that in the middle of my kingdom I'll never be able to find.
Yes. Yeah. I love that you've brought that in, that there's the foreboding and there's the curiosity of
Mm,
something that is different to what I know.
yeah. Yeah, because having when I'd never been in the dark forest, I thought just foreboding, but having been in the dark forest, I'm like, there's amazing things in there, you know, looking back.
Mm.
There's beauty in there for sure, but there's also other things, there's beauty and terror.
Mm. Mm.
And so she tosses the ball up many, many times. And one time she tosses the ball up and puts her hand out to catch it, but it doesn't land in her hand. And it seems as though the ball, almost of its own volition, lands upon the ground and begins to roll away from her. And she grasps at it, but doesn't go as fast as the ball can go. And it rolls and it falls into a deep well, a deep, dark well. And she looks into the well and she can't see it anywhere. And she sits at the side of the well and she begins to weep and lament.
Mm. The description of the ball rolling, like it seems to roll is of its own volition. Is that what you said?
Mm. Yeah.
You like immediately I thought of like initiation,
Yeah.
like that we need to go through this forest in order to like grow. There's some kind of sort of fatalistic, and maybe that's not the right word, but there's some kind of impetus that there's a need to go in there.
Fatalistic is an interesting choice because it's like, is it my destiny or is it my fate?
Mm.
Because fate has the root of fatal. There's a
Mm.
there's an execution or a death happening here. And
Mm.
destiny has the feeling of like something I'm moving towards. But in actuality, it's sort of a both because as we know about initiation, right, it's a death and a rebirth process. And she's now going through, I would say, like what you just said of the ball. And that's why I like that piece that it has its own volition,
Mm.
that the ball is intelligent and it
Mm.
wants to be at the bottom of the well.
Which makes me think of like how I see and experience the body, how I've been kind of, I've learnt that through body dreaming that the body is intelligent. It has its own intelligence, right?
Mm.
That
Hmm.
it's intelligent and adaptive.
Yeah.
So just kind of circling back to that, well, what's wrong with me? But what if there's an intelligence to however the body is
Yeah.
responding? And so here's this ball rolling with its own intelligence into the well.
Yeah.
It wants to go into the well.
Yeah. And we may be in a process of like, what is wrong with me? Exactly. What is wrong with me? Why did I do that? Why did I play here? Why didn't I stay where it was safe? And this is where Saturn, which can show up as the inner critic, can come in internally and just say, like, what are you doing? You knew better than that, right? Like a voice comes in
Mm.
and this is where I think shame and shame dynamics begin to enter. Um,
Mm.
where I was just playing and now this has happened, right?
Mm. Mm.
Where she sort of we can in the princess's position sort of scramble back to our innocence. But the innocence is lost in this moment. The golden ball and the princess have been separated from each other. And what we don't want to do is to sort of lighten the load of that intensity because that's a burden. That's painful. And I think oftentimes it does come with a lot of interior inner critic kind of operates at this point. That
Mm.
I made a mistake, that I'm wrong. I'm a child of sin, whatever it might be.
Mm. Mm. I find it also interesting that she's really like weeping. Was that the word that you used to describe what she's doing?
Lamenting is my favorite
Lamenting,
fairy tale word. Yeah.
lamenting. And so she's like allowing that kind of expression of like lament and sadness at the loss of something that was really precious to her. So
Yeah.
she, I think that's really actually beautiful that she's able to sit there and be in that.
Mm. She's in the well, isn't she? I mean, she's in one part of her is still on the surface, and one part of her is in the well, and she's
Mm.
she's experiencing grief and loss for the first time, we imagine,
Mm.
and pain, the pain of separation. Because you talk about initiation, it's like, I mean, initiation is to say that the place that we've been doesn't fit anymore. We have to move. We have to change. And our whole life is a bunch of initiations. There's no way around it, right? Like, we make our way. The womb was probably quite comfortable for most of us, and we have to go.
Mm.
Time comes and we make our way down the tunnel. We make our way out and we separate from the placenta, like we make that move.
Mm. Yeah, and then we cry. And that's an
And then
important
we
part of it, right?
cry.
To hear the
Yes.
cry of the baby when that first breath is also the cry. And so here she is sitting at the well, and there's this appropriate grief. There's an appropriate lamenting
Mm, yeah.
through the process that she's going through at this point.
Yeah. And who should appear into this scene of separation? Uh, but a frog. And she's wailing and crying, and she hears, "What's wrong, princess? Why are you crying?" And she's like, "Where'd that come from?" Down here, she sees this frog. It's like, oh, a frog that's talking to me. Okay. And the frog is like, "Why are you crying? What's going on? What happened?" And she says, "Well, you see, frog, I was here, I was playing with my golden ball, I was having a joyful time. The ball fell and it fell into the well. And now, this is my favorite toy, my favorite plaything. I don't have anything like this. And now it's gone." And the frog, quite cheerfully, says to the princess, "Don't worry about that. Look at me. I'm a frog. If there's one thing I'm good at, if there's one thing that I'm good at, it's going into wells, it's jumping and bouncing around. I go between the water and the land, and that's very easy for me. Don't worry, princess. I'll take care of that for you. I'll go get that golden ball if I can enter your palace, I can eat from your golden plate, and I can share your pillow. If I can enter the palace, I can eat from the golden plate, your golden plate, not a golden plate, your golden plate, and share your pillow." And the princess thinks like, mm, it doesn't sound so good. But then again, this is just a silly frog who
Mm.
really can't do any of those things because my palace is a palace and I've got guards and I've got soldiers and I've got a father and I've got everything that can protect me from this frog. And so she's like, "Whatever." And she goes, "Yeah, okay, no problem. You've got a deal." The frog says, "Do we have a deal?" And she says, "Yeah, we have a deal." So the frog jumps down the well, picks up the golden ball, brings it back up from the well, gives it to the princess, and says, "There you go." And the princess immediately starts to run back to the palace. And the frog says, "Wait, princess, you're going so fast. I can't go as fast as that. I'm a frog. Pick me up." And she thinks to herself, "Silly frog. What does he know?" And just runs back to the princess, runs back to the castle, goes inside, and just forgets about the whole thing.
I mean, as soon as the frog enters the story, I'm like, I'm feeling myself starting to recoil. And then even
Hmm.
as he starts to, there's a part of me that kind of loves her. I'm trying to find the word for it, but it's not ambivalence, but it's like, I don't know, I can kind of feel her inner kind of negotiator in that
Yeah.
moment where she's like, yeah, whatever. The frog ain't gonna be doing that. But sure, I'll say yes to that. And there's
Yeah.
also such a I suppose because we know the story too, there's just like ugh. I really have a physical response to his demands where I'm like, this is disgusting, you know? It's
Mm.
really quite perhaps disproportionate because I'm just listening to a fairy tale, but I notice how much I feel it, like it's kind of repulsive. Like
Yeah.
I'm grossed out by it, by this frog and
Mm.
its demands of this young girl. I'm already
And
feeling
I,
it a bit unjust.
yeah, and I would say rather than it's disproportionate, it's like this is the medicine inside of fairy tales. It is to be slowed down so we can experience everything that happens inside of us and feel all of those things, you know.
Mm, mm,
It's this is what they're for. They're for us to respond to and to experience and to get and to get ourselves inside of her conundrum as well, right? Like, okay, so here's a frog, you've lost your golden ball. He offers to bring it back.
mm,
Great. That's a good solution to the problem. Then he offers these things. Not so good. So
mm,
inside of her dilemma, which way do you go? Where do you go from there? And this is like dreams, we can, if we think about these as collective dreams, we can also enter moments like this, wait around in here, and each moment has its own inner intelligence to it, and we can stay inside of the dilemma. Um, she's got her desire, the sun, the Leo, to be with her golden ball again. That's very strong inside of her. But there's these demands given, and a contract actually is being put in front of her, very Saturn. And she's seeing the contract and she's thinking about her desires and the contract and the desires. And this is the first time we get sort of like a Sun Saturn oppositional moment inside of the story. It's being offered to
mm.
her. She's looking at the contract. She's very young, but she's, as you said, she's savvy. She's negotiating.
Yeah, she's got some savvy. That's the word.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
We can also hear another place you could enter from to say, like, whoa, I mean, what's she doing making a deal like that, right? We could come from that place and kind of think, like, what is she doing making that deal? We've got options and optionality within fairy tale to enter, to re-enter, to find our way around. And then we have the symbol of the frog. I mean, the frog, as you say, in this story in particular, is like slimy and greasy and disgusting. I think that's like the nature of this frog. We also have frogs as like a liminal figure, a hermetic figure. So it's a trickster who spends all that time as a tadpole and then becomes a frog. So it's metamorphosing, and lives between the land and the sea, the land and the water. I mean, the earth and the water bounces in between. Amphibious, can be in two worlds. So we've got a double-worlded creature that
Mm,
arrives when we're in a double-worlded situation where she's got the known and the unknown worlds, because we know that she's at the edge, right? So at that
mm,
edge, we meet a liminal figure. So that's ways to sort of like be with it on the sort of deeper symbology of what's happening as well.
mm, mm. Yeah. And as I hear you talk about the frog, I'm like, well, it's kind of taking me into the perspective of the frog too. And I like we were saying with myth, it's like that's the great thing about myth is it's the
Hmm.
same thing with, theater. We can be in the shoes of all the different characters. So we get
Yeah.
to see this event from different perspectives. And part of me is like, well, frog's trying to strike a deal.
He's a hustler, but she's a hustler, right?
Yeah,
Kind of
yeah.
hustling each other here. He's thinking like, I got the chance to be a prince here, you know,
Mm, mm,
perhaps, right? I got the chance to get together with this princess.
okay. So then what?
So then night falls and they're at the dinner table. And at this dinner table, I think interestingly and instructively are just two people. There's only the princess and her father, the king. No one else is there. And we don't know why. We'd have no explanation for that. And as they're sitting there to dinner, they hear a knock on the door. And the princess's face goes pale at that point. She's like, oh God. Or she kind of gets a sense of everything that is now occurring. And the soldiers or the guards, they open the big gates of the castle and they look around. They don't see anyone. And it's like, hey, I've got an invitation to dinner. And they're like, what? Is this like a ghost who has an invitation? Down here. And the frog is there. I like to think maybe he dressed up for the occasion, has a little frog suit on. Um, he says, I have an invitation for dinner. It's like, what are you talking about? The guards, what are you talking about? He says, go ask the princess. So the guard closes the door, goes up to the dinner table and says, Princess, there's a frog at the door, and he says he has an invitation for dinner. And again, she's like, oh, she just feels sick to the stomach. And she turns to her father, the king, and she says, mm. And the king says, what? And she says, mm. And the king says, what? How about it? Come on, tell me what's happening here. And so she blabbers out the whole story. She's like, I was there and I had my golden ball and I wasn't paying much attention to the ball. You know, I should have been paying better attention and it fell down the well. And then this frog came and I thought, well, that's a good situation. So, you know, he said that he would go get the ball for me, but he also said that he could come into the palace. You know, he also said that he could come in and enter here. And the king turns to his daughter, the princess, and says, well, if you make a deal in the world, you have to keep that deal. So he sees it as a learning experience. He takes on the mantle of Saturn very clearly here in response to the young princess, the sun, and her desires. And now this is the rules of the kingdom. If you're going to make a deal in my kingdom, that's my kingdom you're making a deal. I can't make exceptions for you. So turns to the guard and says, let him in. And so the frog hops in. I'm interested to hear where you're at with this
Oh
section.
man, there's like so many thoughts running through my head. And I'm like, drop out of the thoughts because I'm trying to come into the felt sense around it. I mean, you really have that sense of consequences, like her felt kind of the consequences of making the deal, that she's being kind of
Mm,
like held to that. And part of me is like, well, this is part of that initiation into the world,
mm,
into being in the world that she's living
mm,
in. Not to say that it's like necessarily right or fair, but it's sort of like, well, this is part of dealing with the world that we're living in.
mm,
And part of me just feels like the discomfort of the king, the figure who takes the position of authority over the girl,
mm.
like that dynamic disturbs me.
Of course.
And yet there's also this sort of sense of knowing that there's this like understanding, there's almost a requirement of to bump up against that in this
Yeah.
process. Like she keeps having to
Mm,
bump up against this friction
mm,
or this um the deal, the consequences of the deal, or the word of the king, her father. Like,
mm,
so part of me feels that, like an understanding around that, perhaps, that it's sort of like the necessary heat,
mm.
perhaps. And then part of me is
Yeah.
like, that is the most unfeminist thing to say, Viv, you're going to be crucified. Because it's like, really? Do we need the necessary heat? Do we really need that? Who's standing up for this young girl?
There it is. Yeah. Who is standing up for the young girl? That's right. Yeah, and I love fairy tales for this because they just land us in there, and it's the fairy tale is not telling you what to think. The fairy tale is a story, and our responses and our reactions and everything that goes on around it is like, oh God, you know. But here we are, and you know, the father slash king is both father and king. And I think it's a really interesting dynamic inside of the split inside the father, because the father is and the king is a very interesting exploration inside of himself inside this story. Because to me, he has an obligation to the kingdom and the rules of the kingdom, and an obligation to his daughter, the innocent. Um, and that's where he is. He's
Mm.
inside of that. He's inside of that
Mm.
tension.
Mm. And as you say that, it's like it's interesting that the kingdom wins. Seems to be often that the kingdom wins.
Yeah. Although we'll see. So the frog comes in, sits down at the table, and the servers come in and they start to set him up a plate and a little plate and a little knife and fork and everything. And he's like, nah, princess, do you remember our deal? It's that I eat from your golden plate. And so the princess turns back to the king, like, okay, right? Like, and the king says, if you make a deal in the world, you have to honor that deal. And so the frog eats from the princess's golden plate. And I actually think this golden plate moment is the pivotal moment, and especially inside of the podcast and inside of like appetite, hunger,
Mm.
desire,
Mm.
satiation, satiety.
I feel confused. Like I feel it's really hard to, there's competing kind of feelings in there.
Yeah.
Mostly, um, it's like the discomfort with the reiteration by the king.
Mm,
Like it feels very uncomfortable to hear him repeat that. Like it's almost starting to become what feels like a misuse of that
mm,
already.
yeah. Yeah. Something is very stuck now, the way I experience the story anyway. And I want to leave it open to anyone and how they're feeling out there that's listening, right? Like that's really, of course, but then Viv and I also discuss it. So there's like a stuckness in the rules now, right?
Mm, mm.
It was
Yeah.
like, that's a fair point, right? Like, you don't want a privileged princess going around making all these deals in the world and just like, oh, whatever, I don't care. I'm rich, I'm privileged. I don't actually have to care about anyone out here.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not the kind of daughter that he wants. And yet, and so the first one is like, fair point. The second one is like, okay, but that's her plate. And the plate is food and nourishment and nurturance and now it's slimed up with like it's graphic. I actually find this scene very, when we slow it down, you can see just a frog just messing around in your plate there, right? Sliming everything up.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, wait,
Yeah.
what? Because that is that, and I think this golden plate is a sort of the next image of the golden ball. The golden plate is another round
Mm.
image, but now the nurturance that we get from our inner gold is now slimed, and it's slimed because the external authority didn't come to, you know, help within this. And you kind of hope that the rules of the kingdom are good for the people, you know.
Yeah.
But now
Yeah.
this rule is not good for the people, not only the people, his own daughter. And you're just like, what? It's like this turning point, pivotal moment inside of the story.
Mm.
And I might just keep rolling with it here.
Mm. Mm.
She pushes the plate aside in disgust. And she's like, I'm actually not very hungry anymore. Um,
Mm.
that's an interesting moment in itself that I've never really sat with. Like, first little
Yeah.
bits of agency, first little bits of like, you know what I can do though, right? Like, I can sort of hunger strike this thing.
Yeah.
It's like a statement that she makes, her first real statement. And then she's like, you know what? I'm tired. I'm gonna go retire to bed. She gets up, she starts walking towards the stairs, and the frog says, princess, do you not remember the deal? The deal is that I can enter the palace, I can eat from your golden plate, and I share your pillow. And at this point, she looks to her father like, okay, now, surely, right? Looks to the father like, and the father says, if you make a deal in the world, you have to honor it. And so she's like, oh my God. And picks this frog up with two fingers just by the foot and takes him up the stairs, takes him into her chamber and puts him over in the corner of the room and says, listen, no funny business, okay? You've been allowed into this situation, but this is as far as you're going to get. You can stay there the night. When I get up in the morning, I'm taking you back to the pond. And the frog says, princess, don't forget our deal. Our deal is that I sleep on your golden pillow. Now, don't make me go get the king.
Ah,
At which point, the princess reaches down and picks up the frog and says to him, you disgusting, odious frog, and slams him into the wall.
wow.
So the frog gets splattered into the wall. And in that moment, in only that moment, a prince is revealed. And the prince turns to the princess and says, oh my God, princess, thank you. Many, many moons ago, I was cursed by a witch. I got lost in a dark forest. I'm actually a prince, but I got lost in the dark forest and I was cursed by a witch. And the witch had turned me into this frog figure, had metamorphosed me into this frog. And until this moment, I'd remained a frog. But by the grace of your action, I have retained my human form and my prince form.
Yeah. I mean, you're really cheering for her when she slams that frog against the wall, aren't you?
You are. You are.
And I can kind of feel like it in my belly and in my arm. Like I can feel that motion that, like you said before, that first movement of agency when she moved the plate away, that this is so important because he threatens like, well, don't make me go and get your dad.
Mm.
And that's where you're like, the collusion is
Mm.
is really horrible. Like it's kind of pretty offensive by that point.
By that point, yeah.
And that she's been just pushed so far that she's like, that's it.
Yeah. And I feel like when she reaches down to get the frog, it's like she reaches down into the well, you know? She reaches down into a part of
Mm,
herself that still remembers her golden ball and her fire and her ability to say no to it's like this is the moment when there's a transfer of authority from the king and the kingdom and the rules to her interior knowing.
mm,
Um, and she reaches down and finds something powerful.
mm. Yeah. And it's
Something of
instinct.
her essence in a way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's it is it's instinct.
Mm.
She's not thinking about that. She's just like, it's what it feels like, an impulse to me that she's just
Yeah, she
happy.
can't be following her mind in that moment. She's something else. It's kind of like the volition of the golden ball, right? The golden ball firstly wanted to go to the well, but the golden ball did not want her to remain in the well, right? And remain in a sort of like a dark, dingy place and stagnant waters. The golden ball now with as a new volition of like stand up to this.
Mm. Mm.
And then there's a revelation and a transformation of the whole scene, and the whole kingdom in a way gets transformed inside of that one action and that one act. Like a potency and a vibrancy is restored in the prince, in her. Interestingly, we never hear from the king again. So there's no other moment with the king. And I've had some clients I've worked this story with because it comes up in my psychotherapy sometimes.
Mm.
And I remember one client at this moment being so scared of what the king's going to say when she goes downstairs. It's
Wow.
like, wow, this story's really in us. It's like really lodged in a way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think even more so because I'll bring up now that, when this story gets brought to the English think that that's not very suitable for a young princess to be violent in that way. And so they change it. And that's how we get eventually to the kiss that we all know, that the princess kisses the frog and then the frog turns into a prince. That's what we know now. And in the context now of knowing this story and knowing that that gets changed to that, what does that leave us with?
Like, I am repulsed.
Right.
Honestly, I'm repulsed that she kisses the frog.
Yeah.
And if we're circling back to appetite and desire, and how, if we were to look at the behavior of the king as kind of like dominant Western culture, right? Maybe we could say that, saying
Mm,
like, this is what you must do.
mm.
Like, how hijacked that she then is made to kiss the frog. You know,
And that's what
she's
becomes
really,
in the,
there's no medicine in the story
yeah.
because she never gets to reach into the well that way.
And that's what we inherit actually, because most people, where I got to with this story, 15 years ago, I actually read a book by a guy called Dr. Alan Hunter, and it was called like Frogs and Princes and Ugly Somethings or something like that. It was this book about fairy tales, and he elaborated on this inside of the story, and I thought it was really great. And the point being that if you ask people what happens in the story of the Frog Prince, as we know it, what happens to the frog, pretty much everybody that I've talked to and ever asked that question of will say, "Oh yeah, that's the one where the princess kisses the frog." It's like you ask people, "How does that resolve?" Well, the princess kisses the frog, and then there's a prince. So what's the story? The story means that you got to kiss all these frogs in order to find a prince.
It's truly twisted. Like,
It's really twisted. It's fucked up.
I really appreciate you bringing that in right at the end, because now I'm like, yeah, even as you're saying that, like, what's the story? It's like, almost like, it's dissociative. It has a dissociative
It's
impact on
dissociative.
my
That's really
body.
well said.
It's
Yeah.
like, there's nothing. There's nothing there. At
Hmm.
least when she throws the frog against the wall, like, I feel that movement, that instinct, that impulse. But with the kiss, it's weird. It's it's like, yeah, there's no medicine.
Well, it's perpetuating it, isn't it? It's like fawn response. And it doesn't have the potency and it doesn't have the power and it won't do the job.
Yeah.
It won't do the job. And it's interesting, right? Because what is revealed from the frog is a prince, but the story is called the Frog King.
Yeah. So what's that about? Tell me about that.
Who's the real frog here?
Ah,
Or maybe, like you said, the collusion between frog and king is the actual story. The collusion between
wow.
frog and king. The frog king.
The collision between the frog and the king is probably the most kind of disturbing moment for me
Yeah.
in that story when that collusion becomes very apparent.
Hmm.
That's when you're like, this is actually wrong. What's
Yeah.
happening here is like
And
deep,
you yourself
deep.
got drawn into the story, right? Because, and me myself, we as the listener, and that's the beauty of story because like it's not giving it to you, it's not giving it to you. You got to wrestle with it. You got to read this story backwards and forwards a bunch of different times. I've spent, as I said, 15 years with this story. It comes up in different ways. I've already done two podcasts on it. One in my old podcast and one in my new one. It's a very important story. It's the first of the thing, right? It's the first of their collection.
Mm.
But I want to take you to the end because this is not the end.
Mm.
Um, because the actual name of this fairy tale is The Frog King and Iron Heinrich. Um, so then the next day, um, a faithful servant to the prince comes to pick him up, and he sees that he's with a princess, and the two of them go to the new kingdom. Right. So this is a fairy tale moment of like, there's a new place that we're going to. We can't stay here. Like in the story of the handless maiden, we can't stay here. This is too much shit has happened here. We've got to move to a new place. And he's driving them in the horse and carriage and have a fair way down the road. And suddenly they hear a crack and the carriage stops. And the prince says, "Everything okay there, Heinrich?" He's like, "Yeah, yeah, no problem." They drive for a little while longer, then crack. "Is everything okay, really?" It's like, "Yeah, yeah, it's fine." He's like, "Well, what's going on? Are we losing axles on this carriage or something?" And then they go a little further down the road and they hear one more time, crack. And then it's like, "Stop, wait." And the prince and the princess get out, and the prince is like, "What's happening?" And Heinrich turns to him and says, "Well, actually, Prince, if I tell you the truth, when I saw you, you were such a beautiful prince. I was so faithful and loyal to you. And when I saw you in the shape of a frog, I was so heartbroken, so grief stricken. I had so much grief in my heart and pain that I didn't really know what to do with it. And so I put these three iron bars around my heart. And seeing you now back in your real form and seeing you with this beautiful princess and the love that's occurring between the two of you, my heart is open and I cannot contain the love that I feel. And it's breaking, it has broken through the bars that I put around my heart.
Mm.
And that's the end of the story.
I'm going to just flip this one back on you and say, what do you notice relating with that end?
I mean, to me, this is like it's its own fairy tale. Inside of a fairy tale, it's like a buried treasure. Uh, and for me, it's so beautiful and so redemptive
Mm.
and such a good descriptor of that pain that we all feel, that things are not right. Um,
Mm.
that frogs don't want to get away with frog stuff.
Mm.
Um, and just the loyalty and the love and the care and the compassion of this faithful one is so powerful to me. And that the only thing that'll break through those iron bars around our heart which is very Sun Saturn right there, because Sun
Mm.
is the heart and Saturn is those iron bars. The only thing that sort of really resolves that is such an overflow of love again, like such a witnessing of beauty, like such a knowing of what we're doing this for or what we're fighting for or what we're doing here and what we're
Mm.
really up to. And it's like so deep inside of the chest that it breaks out of a lot of different sort of like a lot of shame and a lot of pain, a lot of grief, a lot of blame, the whole sort of like gender war and blame and shame that goes on in between, like everything that kind of like gets lodged inside of the heart. And that you said dissociative, like, well, if you got bars around your heart, you can't feel. And suddenly feeling is restored.
Mm.
Um, like again, we go
Mm.
back to what the princess did. It's like, oh, well, that set off a different chain of events, you know?
And what a different masculine figure the
Yeah.
the loyal man to the prince is to the I feel myself kind of thinking about him versus the king,
Yeah.
like the authority versus in servitude,
Yeah.
service to that youth, that um like if we're thinking archetypally, you know, in service to that gold, the sun, the energy of the young prince or the
Yeah.
young princess.
Yeah. Like, it's also sort of return of innocence when like, I mean, any arc is kind of like innocence, innocence lost, innocence regained. But when it's regained, it's without the naivety. I think what the
Mm.
prince and the princess know now, and faithful Heinrich, Iron Heinrich, what they all know now is that the world's full of danger, that it's got terror in it and it's terrifying, but it's also got so much beauty and redemption in it. And so they come out of, and this is like any story that has innocence and innocence lost must end up in wisdom,
Mm.
because the wisdom is to return to innocence, but to have innocence now sort of like burned away. The reddening process has happened where that you've burned away your naivety and your confusions and your assumptions that the world's always going to be good to you, kind to you, you know, as
Yes.
this idea.
And you're in the, she's got like they're in relationship to their metal. Like, and I don't mean metal,
Hmm.
Metal. I mean metal,
Yeah.
Mettle. Like that's an important part of this process of coming into relationship that with that for the agency to be able to like be in the next sort of stage of life.
Yeah. And that trial and that initiation and that process that they've been through is like, okay, when the princess comes across, who's now going to be queen, right? They're going to be king, queen now. When she comes across those kinds of energies in the world, she's ready for that now. She knows how to handle that and deal with that, so it doesn't become this other thing. So she has the other kind of metal, as in iron, as in boundary, and can make her boundary. She can make her claim on her own space and keep her interior authority.
Mm.
And I think the same for the prince. It's like if he comes, or now the king, if he comes across that energy that is like a deceptive sort of, um, pulling him into this behaviors and pulling him into however you want to see that, when he becomes the frog through the curse, he has an ability now to handle that situation, having been through it. So the innocence and the playfulness return and the joy returns in this arc, right? Whereas, like, it's kind of like the golden ball. The golden ball was there, went down the well, and returned.
Mm.
Um, and while it's down the well, it's devastating, and you just think you're never going to get it back. And we do put iron around us during those times. We get overly protective and overly layered because the world's not a good place. It's not a trustworthy place. That's not the story at the end. That's why I think this last part is so important. It's not the story in the end. The world is just the world, and it's full of beauty and terror as it will always be and always has been. But now we've been initiated in something that can navigate that world, and can be in this world just as it is. Um, with essentially an integrated Saturn Sun, which is what an integrated um, Leo Leo Aquarius. Like
Mm.
my interior desires and the functioning world, and I'm now interacting with that in a way where I'm not going to be corrupted by the world. Um,
But I do have to be in the world.
but I do
Like
have to
there's
be in
an
the world because I
understanding
can't
that,
just remain back here. Yeah, because otherwise the world is lacking of the beauty of the richness of the sun that everybody has that's asking to come out into the world because anybody's interior sun wants to come out into the world, even though if that's just this small world around you. So I want to make sure that that's stated because I think in this world that can mean like, oh, go out and get 100,000 or 1 million followers and be a big celebrity. It's like, no, that's not, it's got nothing to do with any of that, right? It's just like, can I be myself in the world? Can I bring my gifts to the world? Can I bring the medicine that I came in with into the world, which makes it an alchemical story. Like all of these stories, they end up being alchemical.
and part of how I learn to stay connected with that is that I'm going to go through like processes that require me to connect into my agency and my metal.
Yeah.
That's just that's part of it. And for anyone who's watching this, it's kind of hilarious because I currently have the sun like probably getting
Yeah.
sunburn on my face. Like the sun really wanted to make an appearance in this episode. Time of day,
You've been trying
no
to get out of
blinds.
it all
I've
session
been
and
I've been scooting around trying to get into the shade. But I just had to mention that because it's kind of amusing me.
the
Um,
blinding light. And it also like occasionally will shine off of your earrings. So it's really worth if you're listening, you could watch this one. It's like
oh
got
yeah,
some
my
good
golden.
interactions. You've got golden earrings that are also shining the light at us. So there's a good metalog going on in the background if you're watching the video.
Yeah. Chris, it's just been such a pleasure. I so appreciate the way that you took us through that with the pauses so we could have those opportunities to feel into the experience, that it's not just, we're not intellectualizing the myth, we're actually being in it.
Yeah. And in our responses.
Yeah.
And I love that about you, V, because I can always trust your responses, like what you feel is very visceral, it comes forward. And so to work story and work fairy tale with you is really a pleasure. Because it's like, oh, I'm feeling this, oh, I'm experiencing this. It's like, yes. I love that
Always
about
fun.
yeah, like that's something that I really appreciate about your authenticity and congruence. The feeling that you're having is coming forward, even if you're wrestling with it, it's coming forward. And so thank you for sort of modeling that for us as well.
Yeah, and that's a I really appreciate the reflection because that's kind of what we're hoping to bring forth in others in sharing this story and our reflections on the story, and is like how do we do more of that? How do we do more of trusting impulse and intuition and instinct in order to, like you were saying, Chris, like bring our version of that gold to our um, proximate community. Like it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be something that's seen in the eyes of the king as
Yeah,
success. It can be the agency in the bedroom with the frog. Can be that.
exactly. Yeah. And
That's enough
and
to
I think
transform.
that Saturn's role within Aquarius is to say like it's not the world as in this massive place, you know. It's your world, you know.
Mm,
It's in your it's contained actually.
mm,
And then by doing those small things, like if we all sort of come out and help out each other with that, then it starts to build in its own way. And I think like that's the thing. We can feel so hopeless in this world because like, how am I going to stop what's going on? Like none of us want this stuff to be going on in the world, and it's a hopeless feeling. So I think stories like this and ways of working like this is like, okay, but I can come out and just see what needs to be done around here and how can I participate here in my starting with me and then building out slowly from there. And then we're in that relationship between Leo and Aquarius of like slowly, slowly building it out, learning things. Yeah, it's true. I can't make deals in the world that I'm not willing to put through, like go through with, but also I have desires, and that's also not to be shamed. Stories like this help us to come into contact with some of those tension points, um, to clear and clean and find a way, purify, do some alchemical process and come into a sense of right relationship and right participation. And I think that's, to
Mm.
me, at the heart of this.
Yeah. There's something that you said to me, I remember when I was talking about starting a podcast, I think it was, and it might be a Hillman quote about like all knowledge is partial, and we're just comparing notes. Is it Hillman?
Yeah. It's actually my friend Jason Holly
Oh,
who
Jason Holly.
who said all astrological knowledge is partial. And he kind of opened with that when he was collecting people for the Living Astrologies conference, which was in Santa Fe last year. And
Mm.
as he was collecting us, he said he gave us this all astrological knowledge is partial moment, which I think for all of us went like, oh my God, thank God, I don't have to know everything about everything.
Right.
As an astrologer, I have to know everything about everything about this art, which is impossible. So he
Hmm.
helped us to sort of like take away that expectation and allow ourselves with our partialness of knowledge to keep going forward. And actually, the beauty of that is that then your knowledge grows, you know, then you do
Mm.
gather more knowledge through that process. You come up to the edge of your dark forest, the known and the unknown. You become the healthy frog who's able to go to the water and the land, right? To be able to go back to the unknown and bring it in, um, which happens slowly and unfolds over time.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I used to say to myself, well, I can join the conversation.
Yeah.
I can join the conversation.
So welcome to the conversation, V.
Thanks,
Thank
Chris.
you for starting a podcast.
It's such a pleasure. Thanks for being my first guest, and thanks to everyone for listening. And stay tuned for more rich conversations.